years, no cars will be sold at dealerships. Every dealership in the country will be closed within 5 years because everybody's going to buy their car on Amazon. Now, 2002 came and went, and we have more dealers than we had in 97. So I also want you to understand that the coming automotive retail disruption, it's not going to be about the customer experience. We talk about the customer experience a lot, and this is what people on Wall Street and people in Silicon Valley don't understand, is that people really haven't loved buying cars for decades. And you are going to be disrupted as an industry because of the customer experience. A single dealer might be able to disrupt your market if they begin to offer sort of a Chick-fil-A experience in their dealership and they become Chick-fil-A of dealers in your market. But overall, the industry, we're not going to lose out to some new group that creates a better customer experience. We're also not going to lose out to online sales. This is a big misstep of Wall Street today. There's a company out there that's worth $3 billion, worth more than Lithia, because they do it 100% online. But as we know, 96% of millennials say they want to test drive, right? And so we're not going to lose out to that. Plus, every dealer in this room, you can add online sales today. You can very cheaply get with a company like Roadster or Drive or AutoFi and add online sales right to your website, and you can do it. So the industry's not going to be disrupted by that. And certainly the industry's not going to be disrupted by a gimmick like a vending machine. There's just too much that goes on in automotive retail that you all know about that it's not going to happen that way. But where we need to watch out is where math comes into play. True industry disruption has only occurred, this technological disruptions that people talk about, when you have a convergence of price and convenience. And that's what I'm talking about today. That's what we're going to map out on this cocktail napkin. And so I've got the y-axis there on the cocktail napkin. What I'm going to plot there is the cost of the alternatives to owning and driving your own vehicle. All right, so at the bottom of that, at the bottom of this graph, we're going to plot things that cost less than owning and driving your own vehicle. Transportation options that cost less, and at the top, they cost more than owning and driving your own vehicle. And then across the bottom, we're going to do convenience, but we're going to add safety to it. So we're going to look at the convenience and safety of the alternatives that are out there or that are coming that are on the left side are less convenient and or less safe than owning and driving your own vehicle. And on the right side are more convenient and or safer than owning and driving your own vehicle. And the reason that I put safety in there with convenience is simple. It's darn inconvenient to be carjacked, isn't it? You know, it's darn inconvenient to be mugged on the subway, right? Those are kind of some life inconveniences that we really don't want to face. And so that's why I plotted it there. We're going to break the chart into 4 quadrants, thus the word quadrant, right? In quadrant 1, anything we plot there is going to cost more and be less convenient and or less safe than owning and driving your own vehicle. Quadrant 2, those things cost more than owning and driving your own vehicle, but are more convenient and or safer. Quadrant 3 at the bottom left, anything we plot there is less convenient than owning and driving your own vehicle, but is a lot cheaper. And then quadrant 4, this is the holy grail of disruption. This is what we need to begin to prepare for. We're going to plot transportation options in quadrant 4 that cost less than owning and driving your own vehicle and are more convenient and or safer. So let's all agree, last night when I was preparing this presentation on the cocktail napkin, I just scribbled out quadrant 1, right? Can we all agree that any transportation option that shows up in quadrant 1, right, more expensive than owning and driving your own vehicle, less safe, less convenient, that's not going to do anything to us, right? In fact, there is really nothing that exists there except maybe an ambulance, okay, that costs so much more and, you know, you're going to take it, but you got to wait 20 minutes for it to come. So that's not going to disrupt the industry at all. In quadrant 2 is where we really want to start. Let's start, though, with things that have been around for 100 years. We'll start by plotting private limousines. Private limousines, people take them today. They cost much more than owning and driving your own vehicle, but they are more convenient and safe for the people who rely on private limousines. At the other end of the spectrum, we'll put city buses. And I don't know about Denver, but places like Los Angeles, the city buses are full. I saw about a dozen city buses yesterday, and I think I counted 2 total people. Is that pretty common for Denver? City buses, I think we can all argue, are a lot cheaper than owning and driving your own vehicle. But if you've ever taken one, especially in a place like Los Angeles, they're darn inconvenient, and they don't go into the best areas of town, right? If I want to go to work on a city bus in Los Angeles, I have to walk 3 or 4 blocks to a bus station. I'm going to get on that bus. I'm probably going to have to take 3 different buses to get to my destination, and then they're not going to me at the front door of my business, right? I now have to walk another 3 or 4 blocks, and so I'm giving up a couple hours of my life, and I'm on the bus's schedule, not my own. So it's darn inconvenient. It's not very safe, but it costs less. Now, why do people take the city bus? Because they can't afford a car, right? And so that's why the city bus in a place like Los Angeles, it gets a lot of traffic. Let's plot taxis on here. Taxis have been around more than 100 years. We take taxis today, even though most of us use Uber, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But taxis cost more than owning and driving your own vehicle. So why would we ever take a taxi? Because it's more convenient, right? And so sometimes we take a taxi. And then one thing, though, that has been disruptive, but it's been disruptive so slowly over time that we really didn't notice it, but it's the first sort of alternate form of transportation to owning and driving your own vehicle that goes into quadrant 4, and that's the New York City subway system. And I put the New York City subway system there instead of, say, every subway system, because you may not know this, but in New York City, 56% of households don't own a vehicle. Not 56% only own one vehicle. 56% of households own no vehicles. Compare that to 9% of the total U.S. Now, why is that? Well, if you've ever traveled in New York, you know that it is darn inconvenient to take your car down into Manhattan. It's more convenient to take the subway. It also costs much less than owning and driving your own vehicle. So let's keep New York City subway system in mind when we talk about where the disruption is going to come. Now, in 2009, this company named Uber was founded in San Francisco. 2012, their sister company came along, you know, their nemesis in Lyft. And since then, they've disrupted a lot of industries. I think we can all agree that Uber and Lyft have disrupted the taxi industry. I think we can all agree that Uber and Lyft has disrupted the rental car industry. Why is that? Well, it's because when I landed at the Denver airport yesterday, I hopped into a Lyft and took a Lyft into town. In the past, I probably would have rented a car, but it's $42 to park at my hotel overnight. So the cost of a rental car plus $42 a night parking made it cheaper and more convenient for me to just walk out and get into a Lyft. And so Uber and Lyft, they sort of cross over into all three of the quadrants that matter, right? There are times that they are cheaper than owning and driving your own car. For example, the people who ride the city bus during the week, if they want to go somewhere on the weekend, say go out on the town, they're going to hop into an Uber or a Lyft. It's going to be cheaper than owning their own car, but it may be less convenient than if they had their own car. And then we see where it goes into quadrant 3 as well, but the big, where it goes from quadrant 2 and quadrant 3, but the big one is quadrant 4, right? 11% of people polled said that because of ride sharing, they're less likely to own a car now. Now, I want you to be careful about polls because we asked them, right? And then that's why they answered what they did. So where is this industry disruption going to come from? Well, it's going to come when we have math, when we have price and convenience, and they converge. And I think you know where I'm going with this, where price and convenience is going to converge, and where it will begin to disrupt our industry. And I'm not talking about industry annihilation. I'm not talking about every dealer going out of business. I'm not Bob Lutz talking about you've got 5 years to get your car off the road, right? What I am talking about is that we're going to have industry disruption. Will it be 33% fewer dealers? Will it be 50% fewer car sales? No. I also don't know what the timeline is. You can prepare. Now, why do self-driving fleets, and notice I didn't just say self-driving vehicles, I said self-driving fleets. I will probably never own a self-driving car. I won't need to. Because if it's not in a fleet, it's going to sit 94, 96% of the time. Self-driving fleets are in the bottom right of quadrant 4 because they're much cheaper than owning and driving your own vehicle. I'll get to that in a second. And they're much safer. So we know from statistics that 94% of accidents are human-caused. Forget about Uber's self-driving technology for a minute and just think maybe Waymo. If we can save 94%, if we can stop 94% of the accidents, we know that they're going to be safer. They're also going to be more convenient than owning and driving your own car, despite what some people say. I hear all the time, you know what, I have a car because it's where I store my golf clubs. And I don't want to have to get a self-driving Uber to have to put my golf clubs in the trunk and take them in and out. We're the wrong way. The golf course is going to send a self-driving unit to your place, and they're going to pick you up, and then they're going to pick up all your buddies, and you're going to drink in this self-driving unit as they take you to the golf course, and you're going to watch golf videos or striptease or something. and it's going to be different than we think about it today. It's going to be more convenient because I can order it on an app, and it's not sitting 94, 96% of the time. Also, it's going to be more convenient because I'm never going to have to take it in for repairs. I'm never going to have to wash it. I'm never going to have to stop for gas. Now, why are they going to be cheaper? Well, they're going to be cheaper because they don't have a driver, right? So they're going to be cheaper than Uber. They're going to be cheaper because they're going to be all electric. Electric vehicle has what? About 20 moving parts. Internal combustion engine has what? About 2,000. And so they're going to be cheaper. It's already cheaper to generate the electricity it takes to drive a car, an electric car, than it is to put gas in that car. And here's another reason they're going to be cheaper. They're going to be in fewer accidents. So the insurance is going to cost less. But because they're fleets, they're going to self-insure. Why wouldn't they? And so where we think about the average American spends what, about $9,000 a year when they own and drive a vehicle, they're going to be spending a fraction of that. What is that fraction? I don't know, $3,000 a year? Also, you're going to have companies like Walmart, who, just like the golf course, will send a shuttle to your house, pick you up, take you to Walmart to get your groceries, help you load the groceries into the vehicle, and then take you home. Tell me that's not more convenient than owning and driving your own vehicle. So this is the bad news, but I don't want you to worry about that. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're sitting there and you're saying, Steve, you're nuts. Most people will never trust a self-driving car. Who's thinking that? Most people will never trust a self-driving car. A couple of you went like this. Okay. 20 years ago, if I asked you, would you ever buy shoes without trying them on? You would have said, but Steve, most people will never buy shoes without trying them on. How about if 15 years ago I asked you, would you ever live without a home phone? I haven't had a home phone in 10 years. How about if 5 years ago, if I ever said to you, hey, will you ever hop into a car with a stranger and let him take you somewhere? You'd say, are you nuts? I don't just have cocktail napkins, I also have Polaroids. There's my Uber driver. I got in a car with a stranger yesterday. He brought me right where I needed to go. We had good conversation. He was from Cuba. Good guy. Angel from Cuba. Really good guy. Great conversation. Complete stranger. I'll never see him again in my entire life. Would we have agreed to do this 5 or 10 years ago? No, we certainly wouldn't have. And so we've got to be careful about when we say never, that people will never do something. All we need are a few years of some pretty good stats and math, and people will begin to abandon car ownership. I know some of you are calling BS on that. Some of you are saying, but Steve, most people will never give up the joy of driving. You like driving. I like driving. We're in the car business, right? Here's another Polaroid. What if this is your morning commute? Where's the joy in this, in choking on exhaust fumes for 45 minutes or an hour and a half each way, every day, 5 days a week? What if in those lanes that are on the left, there are autonomous Ubers flying by, I probably shouldn't say that, autonomous Waymos flying by at 9 an hour, an inch apart, and they're getting people to their destination in minutes where you're taking over an hour and a half to get there? How quickly would you give up the joy of driving? I have something for you. Some of you came here in an Uber or a Lyft, didn't you? You came from the dealership or you came from your home this morning in an Uber or a Lyft. Why? Because it was more convenient and it cost you less money than bringing your own vehicle down here and parking for $30 a day. And so we're already making those decisions. And when those fleets become ubiquitous, when they become everywhere, people are going to make that decision. They're going to make that decision with math. Now, I know we're in the car business. Some of you are saying, but Steve, Americans love their cars. Have you ever been to a Walmart parking lot, say 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon? Take a look at the vehicles there and try to count what percentage of those people driving those 1998 vehicles with 300,000 miles and duct tape holding on a mirror, how many of those people love their cars? But let me ask you this. Why is it 56% of New York City households don't love their cars? They're Americans, aren't they? Most of them, right? Because of math, because of price and convenience. Folks, it's going to happen. I'm sorry. We can legislate a bunch, and we'll probably hold it off for a number of years. But at some point, 20 years, pick a number, I don't care. I'll agree to any number you say. Unless you're Bob Lutz. Pick a number, and I'll agree to it, but then let's start the plan, okay? See, we've got some good news. The good news is we have time. If we recognize this now and start doing the right things now, when disruption comes, it won't affect us. It'll have a minimal effect on us, where our neighbors, it may hurt quite a bit. We've got 263 million reasons right now not to panic. And March, I just saw the number, it's a 17.4 million SAR. Fantastic. 263 million or 264 million vehicles on the road today. Those vehicles are going to need to be serviced, they're going to need to be bought, they're going to need to be sold, and we've got the facilities to do all of that. So it's going to take some time, right? And we can prepare. Now, what do I mean by prepare? If I had Stauning Motors and I was faced with this, there are 5 things that I would absolutely start working on today. First, I would work on the basics. What do I mean by the basics? I'm talking about blocking and tackling. I'm talking about a shortened road to the sale, like Alan's going to teach you tomorrow. Be here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. A shortened road to the sale, but that everybody follows. I visited a dealer recently to help them with their road to the sale. And I said, do you have a road to the sale? He said, oh yeah, everybody follows it. And they had a little card that everybody has in their hands. And I watched the first 5 ups. How many of those ups do you think we followed that road to the sale? It was an antiquated road to the sale, make no mistake. 0. Every salesperson was doing their own thing. They weren't doing the basics. How about this one? How about just getting better on your phones? A couple of phone vendors here. I'll tell you right now, if you are an average dealer, you are losing more sales today because your team stinks on the phones than you are by having the wrong website or using the wrong digital marketing partners. All of that is meaningless until you can get great at the basics. That's the kind of basics that I'm talking about. I'm also talking about if I had Stauning Motors, we would become the Chick-fil-A of car dealers in our market. We would serve hot, fresh chicken sandwiches with a darn pickle on them. No, see if you're listening. Have you ever watched people walk into your service drive and walk up to a service advisor? If the service advisor bothers to look up, which they don't, right? They don't want to make eye contact with that person. If they bother to make eye contact with them and the customer explains, I have an appointment, my name is so-and-so, they look at them like they have 3 heads, don't they? That's not how people are greeted at Chick-fil-A, and that's not how people should be greeted at your dealership. We should welcome every guest and expect them. When you walk into Chick-fil-A and you want to buy a chicken sandwich, do they ask you a bunch of qualifying questions? Have you ever been here before? Which cashier did you work with, right? These terrible road to the sale questions that we ask that customers hate, that make for a bad road to the sale and make for a bad customer experience. And so I would fix the customer experience in my store so that when disruption happened, we would be standing on top. I would also experiment. 10 years ago, it was really expensive to experiment with online sales. You had to spend a lot of money for shopping cart technology that didn't work, and ultimately, you just made your customers mad. Today, I told you, you can start doing online sales today. I would also look into the subscription plans that are out there from FlexDrive and Clutch, because if I had a large enough group, say 4 or 5 stores, that would be something for me. And today, with all the technology, we can dip our toe in the water without having to give up an arm and a leg to do so. And so I would do all the things I could do cheap, but because I'm doing the basics, right, I can look at all those things. I can look at everything. I can explore everything. I would also get and stay lean. And I'm not talking about personnel. We got a little bit fat as we grew with personnel. Some of you have some headcount that you probably need to cut if we're going to hit about 16.5 million this year, right? If we're going to plateau out at 16.5, 16.7, wherever it ends up. But what I'm talking about is I'm talking about your digital marketing. I'm talking about the fact that when I go into a dealership, we find $5,000 to $8,000 a month in fraudulent spend. Just get some ROI metrics, basic ROI metrics. They don't have to be fancy. And just do the marketing spend that's driving your sales, that's driving your service. And then stay there. Put your stake in the ground, and the next digital marketing vendor that wants to come in and sell you something, make them prove it, because you already have the metrics in place to do so. And then finally, I would diversify. I would diversify across all retail, and I'll explain it. First, I would look at used cars. If I don't have a standalone used car operation, I would add one. And I would get great at used cars in my stores. Because remember, 263 million cars are on the road today. And the first vehicles that are going to be hit are going to be new cars, if and when this industry disruption comes along. And so I would get great with used cars. And if I'm already great with used cars, then I would make sure that I'm great at service, especially tires, right? Because electric vehicles still need tires. And when all of this comes along, I want to be known as the service king. And then after that, I'm going to diversify outside of automotive, traditional automotive, and I would look at anything that I don't think autonomous vehicles are going to affect. So I don't think autonomous vehicles are going to affect marine, right? I don't think they're going to affect boats. I have a boat. I couldn't imagine not driving the boat, okay? I'm going to look at motorcycles. I think it's highly doubtful that we'll have an autonomous Harley-Davidson, okay? So I'm going to look at those things. I'm going to look at power sports. I might look at RVs if I can sort of own them and rent them out, but that's where I would diversify to. But finally, I would diversify into other retail, because retail is retail at the end of the day. So I would look at opening up a bar. Why a bar? Imagine when we have autonomous fleets out there. Monday Night Football, it'll be back. Some of you look like you're old enough to remember, we used to go to Monday Night Football, right? We'd stay out, if you're on the East Coast, we'd stay out till midnight on a Monday night, get in our car and drive home. We stopped doing that because drunk driving laws, because of driving under the influence. People will be driving under the influence ad nauseum when we get autonomous fleets, because it'll be so cheap to do so, won't it, right? Why wouldn't we? Right. Here's the great news. Some of you still believe, Steve, you're wrong, it's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen as quickly as you say. Fine. Those 5 things that I just worked on the last cocktail napkin, that's what top dealers do today to stay on top. Other than buying a bar, there's nothing that I talked about on that last slide, on that last cocktail napkin, that is not best practice for a top dealer today. So work on those things today, and you'll start to grow share. And so as sales decline, or if they never decline, you're always going to win. You're always going to be on top. Now, I hope that we don't have too many fist fights after this, but I will be here all day the rest of today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, just out of curiosity, and I know you scribbled all through Quadrant 1, is there anything that was in there or in Quadrant 1 on the napkin, just an example? That
I thought like, an ambulance or something, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But why would it be there for very long?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
we have 263 million cars on the road. We would just buy a car.
I love that. I mean, very creative on the napkins, by the way. I was very impressed by that. Bus, I'm glad you brought that up, because public trans overall, and of course last mile is one of the solutions that everyone's trying to come up with. You save in monetary, but you pay in time. It just is unfortunate. So
make no mistake, if we think about when we saw city buses and private limos at opposite ends of the spectrum, take private limos and make them as cheap as city buses, and they drop down into Quadrant 4 right away, don't they? Because now they're cheaper than owning and driving your own vehicle, and yet they're just as safe as they were up at the top of Quadrant 2. How many of us would own and drive our own vehicle if we had a chauffeur that cost much less than owning and driving our own vehicle? We'd be silly to do it, right?
Yeah, and you talk history, and it isn't that long in the shared ride industry. You talk about Uber and Lyft and how they're together, but if you look at where they started, Uber was that. Uber was the high end. It was the black car. It was
right.
Almost a cheaper limo, not a cheaper taxi. And then Lyft was essentially, I'm going this way to work every day. I will give you a lift, and you can pay me whatever tuppence you think I should have.
Really, ride sharing is kind of the dumbest name out there, isn't it? They really are just the 2 largest gypsy cab companies, right, in the world. They're really not sharing a ride anymore, are they? They've gone from that. One thing, by the way, about never is think about, instead of we're in 2018, think we're in 1902. How many people said people will never give up their horses? People will never give up their buggy, right? How many people said people will never trust those vehicles? Those things are death traps, right? And then technology got better and better, and now today, riding a horse is a recreational activity for everyone.
As a car might be. The one thing that you described that was interesting, again, we don't know that autonomous vehicles will take away congestion, and even a couple examples that you gave where even Walmart sending out, or the golf course sending out that vehicle. At that moment, it's a zero occupancy vehicle, and it's just kind of in everyone's way. But I do believe, even if we're in congestion, and you don't have to be behind the steering wheel, then maybe you're getting work done or you're getting other things done.
True.
And
Yeah, I would take a cab or an Uber to the airport. I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We fly out of Spokane. I would take an Uber today just so I could get work done, but it's so much more expensive than taking my own vehicle. So today I take my own vehicle, but make it cheaper. The one thing though there is a worry that we're going to have all these cars coming to one place, all these fleets coming to one place empty and then going away full. We forget about technology. We forget about the way things are routed. We forget about companies like UPS who are really good at logistics and moving their vehicles in a way that always makes sense. And so when a computer is involved and AI is involved, these things will make more sense, and they won't have as many empty miles as I think we think they will.
Yeah, and once again, the podcast that I'm working on now is called The Flying Car, and I think up and over is the way to go. And that dealerships should be cordoning off part of their lot as a landing area.
Charlie, people will never trust a flying car.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Stauning.
Appreciate it.